Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 21st of September, 2025. It's good to have you here. Let's go to our agenda. That's good. Okay. Few things. Thanks for all the updates in the chat there. It's good to hear from all of you. A couple of things. So first of all, as always, this is a workshop which goes along with our courses over at school.learnlightandsound.com. Of course, anyone's welcome to join. It's out here publicly on YouTube. Join our community. If you're interested in joining us over on the Discord server, we've got a link. We can put a link in the chat. Yeah, we can put a link in the chat. I'll get to that. If you're interested, let me know. It was also in the email that went out. Updated the link there as well, so you can join our Discord server. Today we're going to talk about, and again, this is a workshop, not a audio review, so it's not the refined, polished, produced video with a post-production cycle on it. We're just going to get into talking a little bit about digital audio latency, what it is, give you one example, what that means in practical terms, how it impacts your work or your project, and how to work with it or to work around it, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And we do have a couple questions that were submitted ahead of time, so we'll get those in the chat. Or yeah, we'll get those and then we'll go to the chat for any other conversation going on there. So again, welcome to everybody. Let's start with a little conversation about audio latency or latency in digital audio. And we can go back to the main camera here. Digital audio is a wonderful thing. I love digital audio. It makes things a lot more affordable for people to make quality audio recordings than it used to be, say, 30 years ago. And there are a lot of advantages. I will say there are some disadvantages to digital audio as well, and one of them is latency. And what does latency in this particular case, to give you a definition or to kind of paint the picture for you, let me talk about a fully analog audio signal chain. So if you are making a recording, you will have a microphone, and at some level, even digital microphones are analog at their very first stage. They are literally some sort of capsule that is able to capture sound waves. Sound waves are kind of like standing waves in the air. Those sound waves in the air move the microphone capsule, and then that gets converted into an electrical signal. Now, there are some digital microphones where they can convert that analog digital signal directly to a digital signal and then send that to wherever you're going to use it, whether that be a digital mixer or directly into a computer or whatever it is. But at the front stage is always analog. So in the analog days, you had a microphone which capsule vibrates with the sound waves. That creates an analog. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, it's an alternating current signal that is passed through the cable through a cable typically into a microphone preamplifier. And the preamplifier traditionally, and even on most of the modern equipment that we use today, has an analog amplification stage. So it takes that very weak audio signal, boosts it up, and then from there, it can go a variety of ways. If you have an audio interface, it can take that audio signal that's been boosted up, convert it into digital, send it via USB to your computer. If you're using a field recorder, it can do the same thing, convert it into digital, but send it to a storage device of some sort, whether that be a removable card or an inbuilt solid-state drive at this point, any of those. So that's kind of at the very high level. What we're doing in the olden analog days, pre-digital, what would happen instead is everything would be the same. You go through a preamplifier, which would boost the audio levels to roughly line level, and then from there it could be recorded to tape. Traditionally, in the more recent years, farther back, we're not going to get into that, but there were other types of recorders as well. And then you would have a recording on tape, a magnetic tape. So the tape it would take the electrical signal and encode that on a magnetic tape. That's what happened. Now, the wonderful thing about analog audio is that all of that happened pretty much with zero latency. It all, is an electrical circuit. And From start to end, there was virtually no latency. With digital, on the other hand, as soon as you hit the first digital stage, the analog to digital converter, it takes some time. And our digital circuits have gotten a lot faster. So for example, if we go over to the Mac here really quickly, what my main mixing board is the SQ5 from Allen & Heath. And Allen & Heath is a relatively high-end board. These now, I think, sell for, I think this SQ5 is, I think, a $4,000 mixing board. It is a fully digital board. And they identify the latency at an ultra-low, less than 0.7 milliseconds latency. So that's a relatively high-end board that has 0.7 milliseconds latency. But if we go to the overhead camera, here is a device called the RODECaster Pro II, and I'm not dumping on this. I bought this with my own money. I have used this device. And also, you're hearing audio today through the Mackie DLZ Creator, which is basically a very similar type of device, a digital podcast / live stream mixer. Both of them experience much more latency. So the input to output latency on the RODECaster we're going to measure today. In my original measurements, we measured 6 milliseconds, but I've since updated it to the latest firmware. And we are now on firmware version. I know this is hard to see. We did our best. This is not my favorite screen. It's very reflective, but we're on version 1.6.6. There's some time ago on the live stream here, someone asked if we could remeasure the latency on the RODECaster Pro version 1.5 or later. So my initial measurements were made when it was 1.04 or something like that. So perhaps they've made a difference. Perhaps they've been able to fix that to some extent. So we're going to measure that today. The Mackie DLZ, we measured the input to output latency on that at 5 milliseconds. So there is latency there, substantially higher than what you would get on a high-end digital mixer like the Allen & Heath SQ5. So with that, let's go back to our main camera here. What's the problem with that? Well, when people started going out and buying their very first digital mixers, RODECaster Pro, for example, the RODECaster Pro II is really cool because it is essentially a computer in a purpose-built hardware form factor for recording audio, for podcasts, for live streams, for video production, if you want to do it for that as well. And it has a lot of features. And they're constantly, they have shipped a lot of firmware updates with additional new features. So it's really cool from that standpoint. You couldn't do that with an analog mixer. An analog mixer, you'd have to go ship the whole mixer and they'd have to do something else. They'd probably have to have a digital conversion card in there if you wanted to do all the things that the RODECaster can do. So there's this big trade-off. The price point on the RODECaster Pro II, last I checked, was like, I think $700. Let's check that. BH Photo. Let's go ahead and go to the Mac here. RODECaster Pro II. Yeah, $700. And I think the Mackie DLZ is similar to that, maybe a little higher. DLZ. It's $800 still. Okay, cool. So why is there so much more latency on these less expensive but still not cheap digital mixers like the RODECaster Pro II and the Mackie DLZ? Well, these things will continue to progress and get better, but it is expensive. I think that's the short version. The reason, I think that probably the RODECaster and probably the Mackie DLZ are using off-the-shelf chipsets, is my guess. The SQ line of mixers is most likely using a proprietary chip that Allen & Heath designed. I'm guessing, I don't really know. Or they're using a much more expensive chipset to drive that digital mixer. So that's probably the difference. And there's a substantial difference in price. We're talking $4,000 versus $700. So that's what you're more commonly going to run into, these kinds of latency issues on devices like the RODECaster Pro. So what's the practical implication? Is that a problem? For many people, it's not necessarily a problem, but here's where it became a problem for people that bought their first digital mixer, plugged in their headphones, started talking into a microphone and went, what is going on? Why is my sound echoing back later than I'm actually saying it? And that's latency. That's the input to output latency. So from the time the audio signal comes in from the microphone to the digital mixer to the time it actually gets played out of the headphone amp is on the RODECaster, we're going to measure and find out today. It used to be 6 milliseconds, and on the DLZ it's 5 milliseconds. What does that sound like? Well, I wish I could. We may be able to play that back for you in a little bit here after we do our testing. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's go to our overhead camera and talk about how we're going to do this. This is, again, a workshop here. Got the microphone. I've got a microphone cable here. So let's go ahead and hook this microphone up to the input on the RODECaster Pro. This will be, of course, this is our signal that we're going to measure how long it takes to get into the RODECaster Pro and then back out of one of the outputs. We'll probably measure we can measure both the headphone and the line out, but we'll probably just measure the line output here. Okay, so first, let me get this plugged in here. So here's input 1. Okay, good. All right, let's go ahead and bring our fader to Unity, jump into this channel. Let's tell it we're using a dynamic microphone. We've got a lot of gain we can use here, so let's bump this up. I usually, here we are. I wasn't holding the mic up. That will make a difference too. I usually need somewhere close to 60 dB on most dynamic microphones. There we go. That puts us in kind of the sweet spot here for gain. So I think we're good there. Let's go ahead and turn all of the processing off for this first measurement. So we're not doing any sort of processing here. Let's also check to make sure that we're not doing any processing here at the output. Let's go ahead and turn all of that off. Yep, so the master compeller is off and the output delay is off. Definitely want the output delay off. Okay, so there we go. So we have the input set up. Now I need to be able to measure the output. How do I do that? Well, let's come back in here to the outputs, and they call them monitor outputs. Let's go ahead. We have it set to a fixed output level, so that should be line level. Whoops. So that should be a line level output. So I've got another cable here. So we can come from one of the line outputs. This is just a 1/4 inch TRS cable. Hopefully this won't be a problem since the output's mono, but it will be balanced, so we will see. This might create a problem, it might not. I'm going to plug this into one of the outputs here. There's the, excuse me there, I had to just peek around the back. All right. And then we're going to route that right into input number 2. Okay, so we'll unmute input 2, bring it up to Unity, pop into here. We want to get a line level. Is that an option here? It's been a while since I used this. Line in, there we go. So now we have a line in signal. It's showing a very weak. The RODECaster, I don't know how Rode is defining line level on this, but it doesn't appear to be line level. So I always find myself having to add a good bit of gain. So, well, 21 might be too much. So there's 17 dB of gain. So that's getting us, whoa, it suddenly jumps. Okay, let's come back out, see what we've got here. Let's gain that down a little bit. Checking 1, 2, 3. Okay, there. So the way everything is routed here, I have the microphone that is connected to input 1. That comes into the mixing board. Then I have the line output going from the line output into input number 2. So we're essentially looping it back into the mixer. And I just want to get the isolated channels. I don't want to get the stereo mix. So I need to define how that's set up, and I'll be honest, I have to remember how to do this. It's been a while since I used this this particular mixer here. Got headphones, listen, routing. recording. I want to, there we go, okay. I don't want the main mix. I want a custom. I want to just record those two. Okay. How do I do this? So what is that on the screen? Okay. That means we're not recording those, I think. So not record any of those other channels, just those two. It shows them as linked. I'm not 100% sure what that means, but my suspicion is what that means is those will be in the same, well, let's see here. It's actually fader control, so I don't need these linked. There we go. So now when I pull down input 1, it's not sending input 1 from the output to input 2. Okay, so that's what I want here is, I think we're good. I think we have what we need. So I'm going to go ahead and just record, mostly just record hand clapping. So here we go. I'm going to go to start the recording. Okay, so there's our recording. I'm going to go ahead and pull the SD card out. All right, let's go back to the main camera here for the moment. Any questions in the chat? What do we got going there while I get this file onto the computer? Let's see what you guys are all, what y'all are thinking out there. Cinedur. I did an experiment on my Sennheiser EW100G3, and when recording with 48 kilohertz sampling rate, the latency was 4 samples or 0.0833 milliseconds. Does it sound right? Yeah, that sounds about right. That is largely an analog system. So yeah, that sounds right. SQ5, 0.7 milliseconds latency is analog in to analog out commitment only. It can go higher when using digital in or out, particularly if the in out is for an insert. Christopher, thank you for the clarification. Wasn't latency one of the major talking points when the RODECaster came out? Well, yeah, I think well, I don't remember if it was a major talking point, but I have heard Ryan over at Rode say, I don't remember his exact title, but I think he's in charge of marketing. I talked with him when they launched the Wireless Go, and I remember him saying it was less than 10 milliseconds of latency, and that from his perspective, as long as the latency for your devices are less than 10 milliseconds, you're usually fine. Most people can't notice or won't notice. I think that's possibly true for consumer devices. Maybe people won't notice. Like, is it a problem when you use a Bluetooth device to stream audio from your phone to a Bluetooth speaker? I don't think anyone cares. Even if they're watching YouTube videos or whatever, they're not going to probably freak out too much. It's not going to feel too off to them. When you're monitoring yourself, however, if you're recording into the RODECaster, and that was kind of, I think a lot of the people that buy a mixer like the RODECaster are going to be doing something like that. They are going to probably be the host of that show in many cases. And I think in those cases, they as they're talking, they will hear themselves, and I think they will notice it for the most part. So I'm not so convinced that less than 10 milliseconds of latency is like the gold standard, and but I can definitely hear it. And I find I can work with it if it's less than 10 milliseconds. It's annoying, but I can work with it. When it gets into the 30 millisecond range or higher than that, it gets really disorienting to hear your own voice echoing back or kind of looping back at you with so much latency. So that's one of the big problems here. All right, let's see if... There's a lot more. Oh, there's a lot more. Go, keep them coming. Why they not just use Maddie or Dante like Fairlight did it? Result close to zero latency. Expense probably is my guess. Also, Dante is not Dante is a licensed system, so if they put Dante in any of their devices, it's going to cost them. That's going to be passed on to the people who buy the units. And when you're dealing with a product that is aimed at consumers and prosumers, they're very price sensitive on those types of things. So they were probably trying to hit a price point. Christopher says, I'm really curious to see what Rode delivers with their announcement that they are going to start supporting Dante. They haven't said if it's only for as yet unreleased products, for example. Yeah, I agree. It'll be very interesting to see what that means. We had an interesting conversation over on the Discord server a few weeks ago about that very topic. And I will say my guess is they're going to, first of all, there's all this conjecture about whether they're going to try and implement it in software, which would be existing products, because I doubt they have an existing Dante chipset in, for example, the RODECaster Pro. I would think that would go in a RODECaster Pro II, is my guess. But my guess is that they will put it in products like the RODECaster Pro III, and then our good friends had different perspectives and said it doesn't make any sense. It's for high channel counts. Just doesn't really make sense. It's complex. You have to have all this infrastructure in place as far as your network is concerned to make it work successfully. I don't know. My guess is that they're going to go for it. They're probably going to put it in a RODECaster Pro III would be my guess. And I think the perspective from the product manager's point of view is this is a way to get people trained up on Dante technology, and maybe Rode is going to move higher end. They'll obviously use it probably, and I think it was actually Friedman that made the deal with Audinate, which is a company that is Dante. So I think that also applies to Lectrosonics, for example, to Mackie. So you may start to see them implemented on some of their higher end products first. So it could be Dante output or Dante integration for a multi-channel receiver on the Lectrosonics side. It could be a Dante-based mixer on the Mackie side. We'll see. But I suspect that Rode will try to do something with it too. Okay. Good questions. Keep going. The main problem is USB connection. They did push a format that never was specified for audio. That's why...
Fourier? I don't know.
Fourier was most used by studios. Originally, I think that's true. I think they've got it pretty dialed in at this point in 2025. Monitoring your own voice in your live stream mix live in headphones is the dividing line 100%. Well, especially once you have it, if you're monitoring from your live streaming mixer, there's even more latency there. And that's where it becomes super disorienting, as Danny and I both learned firsthand. For Mac users, there is a free app called RTL Utility that lets you get very accurate round-trip measurements on an audio interface. Very cool. Good to know about that. Actually, looking at their website, RTL Utility is also available for Windows and Linux. Awesome. Firewire. Oh, yes, Firewire. Yep, back in the day, Firewire was definitely capable of faster transfer speeds than USB was. I assume it's routed so the line output only outputs the input one. Yes, I believe so. We're going to find out in just a minute when we download this file. Take a look at it. So let me just actually pull that up here. I'm going to get this file. It's oh no, I don't know that it worked, so I may need to work on this. So I wanted isolated channels, but it calls it a stereo mix. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here. Okay. Let's go to the Mac. Let's take a look at this. So here are my claps. Here's the recording, channels 1 and 2. Let's see if they line up. Yeah, it sent me a stereo mix. That's not going to work for us. I wanted isolated channels, so we're going to circle back and try that again. Go ahead and switch back to the main cam for now. I'm going to close that file here in RX. I got to figure out if anyone is a RODECaster Pro expert on how to record isolated channels, please let me know. We're going to remove that download. No, we're going to move it to the trash so it's not confusing us. And we're going to eject the RODECaster's SD card. There we go. Okay. This is the workshop part. All right. Taking the SD card, putting it back in. Let's go to the overhead cam again. Okay, SD card is back in. Now what we need to do is figure out our routing here. It's not under faders, I don't think. No, outputs. Multitrack. Here we go. Let's go, we can go post fader. Let's try that. Okay, so go ahead and record. Clap 4 times. Okay, we'll pull that card now. I clapped 5 times. Lost count. Okay, back to the main cam here. Get this over on the computer. In the meantime, what have we got in the chat here? Audinate has a software implementation of Dante for ARM CPUs. Oh. And the, quote, high channel counts, close quote, and other arguments for not doing it are clearly from folks not using Dante. Okay. Make no mistake, the hardware chip-based Dante implementation has many advantages, including minimum latency capability, but their software ARM stack does work. Okay. Doesn't the RODECaster have a setting for multi-channel isolated to get the ISOs in addition to the mix recording? I think that's what we found, hopefully. That is the case.
And then we had another suggestion.
Pan them. We could do that as well. Yeah, so we got a few options here. Thanks for that. Okay, RODECaster. Okay, if we go to the Mac, it did something different for sure this time. So now we just got to grab the right tracks. Track 1, combo 1. Let's see what that is. That is a single track. Okay, so let's do this. Let's come into Resolve where we have a multi-track DAW. Let's go here. Let's create this. Let's just get these first 2 here. Oh, interesting. Track 1, track 2. Okay, all these others. I don't know why it brought all of them. I only wanted 1 and 2, but okay. Oh, well, I can just bring these here, down here. Come over to Fairlight. Let's grab both of these, drop them in the timeline, put them down here, and then let's zoom in. Command plus, 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 plus. Ah, there's our latency. You can start to see it already. Okay, cool. So what I want to do is I'm going to now, I don't know if there's a good way to pan them or to measure them here. First of all, let's get rid of this. Let's make sure they're all the way up to the left edge. Okay, good. Let's pan audio 1 left. Go to our panner, which is right here. 100% left. Go to our panner, and for track 2, all the way to the right. Okay, and then let's export this. I do not want to export video. I want audio, linear PCM. Add to the render queue. Oh, I need to give it a name. This is our latency sample. And we'll put that on our desktop for now. There we go. Okay, come back into RX. Close this. Go to our desktop. Did I not put it on the desktop? Okay. Latency sample, okay. Desktop shows nothing. Did it not render? There it is. Here's our latency sample. So I need to get in here and then here. Drop this in. Now I can zoom in. Okay. So we may have some funny phase things going on here. We do. These look to be 180 degrees out based on this. If I go and highlight here to here, looks like 7 milliseconds, if I'm reading that right. So we're 7 milliseconds. What if I go peak to peak? So this looks like it distorted here, but that's going to be harder to measure. But I would assume that this... Yeah, let's go find another one. That one is not clear. Okay, this one, just to kind of as a sanity check. We'll go right before that peak. No, right before that peak. There we go. To right before this one. 7 milliseconds. So that's how we measure the latency. It does not appear to have improved. In fact, it seems longer than it was before. So now 7 milliseconds is what we're reading there. All right, back to the chat. Let's see what we've got going here. Deity Theos DBTX headphones must have massive latency. I think they do. Yeah, people were complaining about that. So that's where you plug your headphones into the transmitter just to kind of check the signal, make sure it's good. And it's, if you're right by the sound source and you have your headphones on, there's like this disorienting. You hear it here first, and then I don't know how many milliseconds. I think we measured that in our review. I don't remember if we did. In my recollection, it was somewhere around 20, 30 milliseconds, something like that. It was pretty massive. The difference, Fairlight, original, not Blackmagic. They did correct the latency additional with fast Fourier transformation and got with the Evo a lower latency in addition with MADI than Dante. Things that Blackmagic do no more offer. Yeah, Fairlight's a very different thing now than it used to be. No question. Mark, for anyone interested in learning Dante, Audinate offers a free training and level 1 certification program. I dropped the link in the Discord server. Mark, thank you so much. Appreciate that. That was one thing Mark and Matt and I were talking on Discord, and Mark does some work periodically on sporting events, and there have been some kind of mixed results, it sounds like, as far as Dante was concerned. You've got to have a really solid... The app needs to be solid and the network needs to be solid for it to really work out. But they ended up dropping back to analog in some cases. All right, why don't we take a look at the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then we'll come back to this discussion a little bit more. Let's see here. There we go. First, this is a multi-part question. I've been considering upgrading from the Deity Connect system for a few years now, but I don't use lavaliers regularly and prefer the sound quality and look of overhead shotgun setups. But lavalier systems can be very convenient. My sentiments exactly. Are there any sound quality improvements between a 2.4 gigahertz system like the Connect I have now and an RF system like the Deity Theos? In my experience, while there can be more interference and less range with a wireless system, if you set the delay super high, dropouts become mostly non-existent, which is my focus, recorded content with editing in post. Whereas with an RF system, you get that nasty static that can be difficult to remove in post, and I've lost entire shoots in the past from static I couldn't remove. A few things, Aaron, to answer your question. So I would not... They're both radio frequency systems. One is using... Deity Connect is using 2.4 gigahertz. Deity Theos is using UHF frequencies. So they're both radio frequency. They're just different parts of the spectrum that they're using. Yet the Deity Connect, they ended up adding a feature, as I recall, where you could increase the latency. I can't remember if the Theos has that as well. I think it might. I think it might actually as well, where you can increase that latency. It if that works for you, that's great. The problem I have is it creates some additional challenges down the road. So if you are, for example, recording with a wired microphone, maybe a plant mic or a boom mic, and you're recording with a wireless system that's set to very high latency to manage any potential interference issues like you describe, the problem is when they come into the recorder, they'll be quite a bit out of sync from each other. In post-production, yes, you can nudge them and get them back in sync, and you can use things like auto-align post and stuff like that. No problem. Yes, if you want to do that. But to answer your original question, is there any sound quality improvements between 2.4 gigahertz system like the Kinect and an RF system or a UHF system like the Deity Theos? Not intrinsically in and of itself, no. It has more to do, I think, with the preamplifiers. It has to do with the quality of the lavalier microphones you're using. It has to do with, it actually, in some cases, you may actually get better sound quality with the 2.4 gigahertz system, depending on which two systems you're comparing to each other. The Theos system has some weird things that it does to the transmitted audio. But on the other hand, Aaron, with the Theos system, you can record at the transmitter pack outside of the United States. You can record at the transmitter pack and transmit at the same time. So then you could use your transmitted audio as sort of scratch audio or kind of a sync reference, and then go back to the original very high quality audio that was recorded to the transmitter pack. The wirelessly transmitted audio has some odd things that happen in the higher frequencies. It's debatable as to whether or not it makes the audio unusable or not. I don't think it's unusable. It depends on the circumstances. If you're doing field recordings and you're very particular about having pristine higher frequency response and no artifacting, then yeah, it's going to be a problem. If you're just recording dialogue and you're going to roll off above 15 kilohertz anyways, then it probably doesn't matter. So short answer to your question, no, you're not necessarily going to get better audio quality just going from 2.4 gigahertz to UHF. That's the short version. So, and there's lots of other context here. There's so many considerations. Are the preamps in the Deity Theos better than a Deity Kinect? I don't have a Deity Kinect system on hand anymore. I don't remember it being the best sounding audio quality I'd ever experienced. But that kind of ties into your next question as well, which we'll get to in just a second. I would not expect a massive improvement in audio quality, to be honest. Bonus question from Aaron. I currently use WLAV Pros from Deity, talking about the lavalier microphone. I think he meant any recommendations on higher quality mics that sound closer to my Sennheiser shotgun mics? No, because lavalier microphones always sound like lavalier microphones when they are attached to a body somewhere. Wherever you place them, they sound like lavalier microphones because they're attached to the sound source, basically. So you have to do some sort of work in post to get them sounding similar. So out of the box, the WLAV Pro is actually pretty decent. Sure, you could spend more money if you want to buy one of the Sennheiser MKE2s. Maybe it'll be less EQ work for you to get them sounding similar. I found the MKE or the ME2s and the MKE2s. MKE2s have a better overall response, but I felt they're a little bright. They seem like they're made for definitely putting underneath clothing. A lot of people have complained about the cable noise from those mics as well. My short answer is save your money and learn how to EQ instead to get your lav mics sounding more like your shotgun mics. Shotgun mics or boom mics of any sort are in a more natural position, so physics is a limiting factor here. They're in a position that's more like normal conversation distance from a sound source. So if you're talking to someone and you're standing 3 feet away from them, you're standing 3 feet away from them. So the sound source is 3 feet away and then it hits your ears. With a lavalier microphone, it's almost like you're hearing a lavalier microphone attached to the person you're talking to. So when they talk, you're hearing, and the lavalier microphones, depending on where you place it, sounds very different. If you put it here in the center of the chest, it sounds different than if you move it up closer to the throat or off to the side or up here in the hair or where, you know, hidden in sun or in glasses on the arm of a sun or of glasses of some sort sounds very different every single time. So, Aaron, the short version is I don't think spending more money is going to solve the problem for you. I think it's more about learning how to EQ and EQ match. We have several videos on EQ matching over on our other channel, the main channel, Curtis Judd. Okay, let's go back to the chat. They're clearly talking about analog RF systems, probably a Sennheiser G3, G4. No, I think he's talking about UHF systems in general, not necessarily analog systems. Digital RF systems are much better, though they do have more latency. I say this because of their reference to the noise in the RF transmission, which is more a function of analog, while all 2.4 devices are digital. I can't speak for exactly what Aaron meant by RF systems, but yes, Deity Theos is a digital system as well. It's just using different frequencies to transmit those digital signals. Chris asks, can you create a Dante folder in Discord? We actually have an IP audio channel in Discord, which would be the right place to put all of that conversation, if you wouldn't mind. We called it IP audio because there's more than just Dante out there, but that's a good place to have Dante conversations. All right, we got the 2 thumbs up. So 7 milliseconds is what we measured. Does anyone want to poke holes in my measuring methodology? Is there anything I missed there? Is there anything I should have done differently? Let's see in the chat. Since you have your RODECaster ready to test, could you try if enabling processing makes latency worse? That's a great idea. So let's go to the overhead camera. Let's do this again. Let's pop into channel 1 and we'll turn the processing on. And we'll apply, let's see, we've got a high pass filter set to 70 hertz. That's good. We've got a de-esser that's now on. We've got a noise gate that's on. Compressor is on. Equalizer is on. Exciter is on. We're just going to turn them all on. Panning is considered an effect as well, or processing as well, so that's on. And that's it. Okay, so hopping back out, let's go ahead and do a new recording here. Oh, got to put the card back in. So first, that means I need to pop the card out. Oh, DaVinci Resolve is using it. So DaVinci Resolve, you need to let go. We can go to the Mac here. Pop the RODECaster out. There we go. Okay, now we can pop that out. We can go to the RODECaster, the overhead camera. Pop this back in. I'm going to need to stand up so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, micro SD card managed. Start the recording. Let's clap. Stop the recording. Pop the card out. Get that into the computer. Okay. Let's get our RODECaster third sample. I want tracks 1 and 2. We'll just go ahead and drop those on the desktop. We will come back into Resolve. Actually, while I have those, I'm going to go, go ahead and pop out the RODECaster card. We don't need that now. There we go. Cool. Okay. Come back into this project. We don't have those files anymore. That's just fine. We can get rid of the timeline as well. All right. So I need to get the desktop, tracks 1 and 2, bring those in, over to Fairlight, pop both of those here. Okay, this one on the left channel, all the way to the left. This one, or actually on channel 1, audio 1. Those are all the way to the left. Let's zoom out, turn off our media pool, zoom in on these. Yes, okay, so we're going to go ahead and export this. This time, out on the desktop, we will call it latency sample with processing. Okay, we don't want the video, we want the audio and linear PCM. Let's see, oh yeah, we needed to pan those, didn't we? So we're going to go ahead and go into our panner for channel 1. We're going hard left. Actually, I don't know that this was necessary because oh yeah, actually it is necessary for what we're doing. Okay, cool. Back to the Deliver tab. We're not exporting video, just audio. Linear PCM. Cool. Render. Back over into RX. On the desktop, we now have our latency sample with processing. Okay, here we go. Okay, we have this initial bump here. I say it's about right there. Actually, it looks like it's still 7 milliseconds. Yeah, that's pretty cool. If we want to measure from here to here, whoops, those don't line up very well. It's still around 7 milliseconds. Whether I put it here or here, it's still 7 milliseconds. Okay, yeah, 7 milliseconds. So it doesn't look like that's amazing. Maybe they just built in the latency to sort of allow for the processing so that the processing doesn't suddenly create more latency than normal. So that's cool. Chris, is there another software to measure latency? Well, Christopher mentioned the one if you want to measure the latency for an audio interface earlier. There may be, I don't know. This is just how I've been doing in RX. You can do it. I used to do it in Adobe Audition. A lot of DAWs have that capability. I don't think Resolve might. I don't know. I've not seen anything in Resolve. Let me see if I do this. Let's go back to the Mac here. I zoom in. And I go maybe to this tool here. I just don't see any measurements. Again, just highlighting the same area here. There may be some measurements, but in any case, the reason I do it in RX is because it has that measurement built into the UI. DaVinci Girl, I think there is a future for physical modeling of microphones, even for at least lavalier microphones. An example for modeling in the UA Sphere DLX modeling microphone. What do you think about it? I haven't used it, but yeah, there are lots of, well, not a lot. There are several now modeling microphones that are traditionally kind of aimed at studio work. So you buy the modeling microphone and either it comes with the software or you need, Universal Audio has their interfaces, whatever it looks like. But there's some combination of hardware and software. And then you can change the settings on that modeling microphone to make it sound like usually some sort of vintage something or other, vintage U87 or a vintage U47 or all these other vintage microphones. And I think that's fine. I don't have any issues with that. I think that's great. In fact, I was thinking of the application in the kind of, based on Aaron's question, it would be interesting if there were a way, and I think the technology is getting closer. I think the technology actually exists today. It just needs to be implemented. But in essence, you could do some recordings with the boom mic that you're going to use and the lavalier mic that you're going to use. Get some sample recordings with both of those, and then create an EQ curve to apply to the lavalier microphone in real time as it's recorded. to the lavalier mic. So it makes it so it sounds more like, I don't know if you'd want to do this live and actually replace the original audio. I don't know, but record a track that has that EQ curve applied to it. So when you get into post, cutting between the boom and the lavalier, pretty simple. You're not going to have to do that post-production of EQ matching. You just cut right between them. So I think there's definitely a place for these types of things in the studio too. It gets, you know, if you go into a studio, it's expensive to have a studio that's outfitted with all these different microphones. So having those modeling microphones can work. I will say this, though, most of the samples and the demonstrations I've seen of those modeling microphones, they're not perfect exact replicas of the originals, but still it's relatively close. And again, I think sometimes we get a little too wound up and too tied up in this microphone is universally better than that microphone. And finding a mic that fits your voice, that you like the sound of, that's great. That's what you should do, ideally. RX11 is expensive. I totally understand. I believe that even I would try Audacity. I would try Reaper. See if they have something that measures latency like that. All it's doing is measuring the time of the selected audio. That's all it's doing. So it's not a latency measuring tool. It's just a time measuring tool. Is really all you're looking for. So could be that Reaper has something like that. Maybe Audacity does. No more questions that were submitted ahead of time, so we're all clear for chat. 7 milliseconds not tolerable for a long-term recording. I share that opinion with you, DaVinci Girl. I find it very annoying. Incident response files is a common way to emulate amp cabs for guitars. It also works on microphones, but those modelers are generally expensive. The modeling microphones are also typically based on IR curves. You can measure the delay like you did in RX in Audacity too, and it has multi-track. There you go. Boom, there's a free option for you. So you don't have to use the pricey tools if you don't have the budget for them. All right, we have a few more minutes. If you have more questions or thoughts that you'd like to share with the community here, go ahead and just @ Curtis Judd Audio, and that'll make it easy for Danny to find it here. For those that didn't see it already, we had our review of the Radius Windshields Mini Alto windscreen over on the main channel. That posted this morning, so if you're interested in hearing that, actually out in the wind, unlike last week we just looked at it here. I outfitted it with a cable from my Rycote Cyclone. The kit that I got did not come with a cable, so we outfitted it with that cable and went out and got some recordings in the winds that were actually 8 to 12 miles per hour. So pretty decent winds going there, so you can hear what that sounds like. Christopher might mention for live streaming that many apps like OBS have delay offsets you can dial in to line up audio with video. Yes, so that's another thing that we should talk about when it comes to latency. While there is latency on audio gear, there's even greater latency in most video gear. So what that means is if you route, and we've talked about this a bunch of times, but if you route your camera into a video switcher, like in this case we have our Canon camera right here, going via HDMI into our ATEM Mini switcher. Then if I took the audio from any mixer, even an analog mixer, and fed that into the line input on the ATEM Mini, the audio and video would not be in sync. In fact, the audio would be ahead of the video, especially if you're using an analog mixer, because it's getting to the ATEM switcher before. And the latency in the video is that the video camera is whatever processing it has to do of the video signal as it's taken from the sensor. That takes time, and that takes even more time than most analog to digital converters on audio gear. So the latency is usually even greater getting out of the camera to the ATEM switcher. So to compensate for that, if we go to the overhead camera here, many of these products, including the RODECaster Pro II, have the ability to add a delay. So if you come into our outputs here, processing, you'll remember we had this page over here, output delay. So I can turn that on. So the way I would measure that is I would do a recording from the switcher of me clapping on camera and recording the audio as well. And then I would check to see how much, this is in milliseconds, so there's some math involved, but you can dial it in. In other words, what you're doing is you're slowing down the audio from the output of the RODECaster so that it doesn't arrive too early at the ATEM Mini. So you're slowing it down. You're basically buffering the audio here for a few milliseconds so that when it arrives at the ATEM, it is in sync with the video. So you're compensating for the latency of the video camera by buffering the audio on your mixer. So that's one consideration. Some other things, let's go back to the main camera here. One of the big questions I've gotten for people that, jumped on the RODECaster Pro II, they were excited and they got it, and then they realized, oh, there's this weird latency in the headphones. I can't stand hearing myself at that latency. What can I do about it? Well, probably the most realistic thing is that you just do a check ahead of time. You won't have the benefit of being able to check your microphone technique while you're recording. So that's a con of, or a kind of a cost of this little workaround that I'm about to present here. But you can go into, if we go back to the overhead camera here, in the RODECaster, you can come into your headphone routing and, is it here? Where is it? There is a place you can, oh, it's here in the routing. So you can set up a different headphone mix. So you can do a main mix or you can customize it, and you can essentially mute your own microphone so you're not hearing your voice delayed from when you're actually speaking. That usually takes care of the disoriented feeling. Everyone else that you're listening to will still sound delayed, but that's usually, I find at least psychologically, it's not as disturbing as hearing yourself delayed. So that's one thing you can do as a workaround. Not the best solution in the world, but it's a workaround. Saw your windshield video. You have a nice landscape outside. It is a beautiful place that we live. Yes, indeed. And that's Danny's rosebush. I think you mean impulse response. The amp and cabinet modeling has gotten so good, it would be interesting to see where that goes with microphones. Impulse response, yes. I think that's right. Delay would be a nightmare for virtual instrument pianos I use. I wonder what the production use case would be, considering pairing sound production to an immediate physical input isn't a priority. Let me make sure I understand this here. I wonder what the production use case would be, considering pairing sound production to an immediate physical input isn't a priority. I think you're referring to what Aaron had mentioned here, where for him, having additional latency is okay because he's going to be doing all this in post-production. It depends. It's not okay for everybody. It depends on the person. So if you're a solo operator and you're doing camera sound, so on and so forth, and you're tolerant of listening to something at 6 milliseconds or 7 milliseconds delayed from the actual sound source, that can be a workable solution for some people that are not as picky about it. But if I were a full-time audio production mixer, I wouldn't want, or a location mixer in particular, especially if I'm boom operating and monitoring and mixing, I would not want to have much latency. And in fact, the high-end recorders have very low latency for that reason. That's why they cost so much, in part why they cost so much. There are a lot of reasons, but that's one of them. So, all right. We have just a few seconds left. People, it's been good to hang a soundies. It's been good to talk with you today. I hope this session was helpful for you. In the meantime, get out there and make some great sound this week, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.